Juan here for Pocketnow, and we're taking a closer look at the BlackBerry KEYone. There's not quite anything else like it, so instead of jumping straight into some comparisons, we'll be highlighting a couple features, looking at what makes this option unique. And what better place to start than with this phone's signature feature? Literally a part of the phone's name, this keyboard is a throwback piece of hardware to the more exciting and diverse days of smartphone design. BlackBerry's transition to a modern operating system might not have been the smoothest, but arriving on Android, this is the third device with manufacturing partner TCL. You just don't see hardware keyboards much these days. As Android evolved, we all just sort of agreed on glass front faces, maybe some hardware navigation buttons. Usually a keyboard feels half-baked, stapled on, an afterthought. We would expect, of course, that BlackBerry would succeed here where others have stumbled. After a couple weeks of use, I can't claim I'm any faster or more accurate at typing on these Tic Tacs. It took some work getting my thumbs to remember what this feels like, but every day I use it, I feel more comfortable taking these presses for granted as they slide into the mental background of my messaging. I've always liked that hardware keyboards allow the whole display to be utilized, but the addition of this hardware moves far beyond text entry. There's a phenomenal amount of consideration for how it integrates into the rest of the Android experience. Of course, we've discussed the fingerprint sensor built into the spacebar, its inspired design, anchoring the phone for how you'll hold it most often. And that runs double for the capacitive sensors, which can augment navigation, sliding over keys to move between home pages or scroll vertically. You rarely have to reposition the phone when using it, and maybe the only awkward slide is reaching up for the power button, which we can all agree is on the wrong side of the phone. See, whenever a manufacturer strays from its normal hardware form factor, we rarely see that change well represented on a first-generation device. A perfect example would be the first iPhone 6 Plus at launch. The big iPhone arrived with an OS that had always focused on one-thumb ergonomics. There was little software to really utilize the additional real estate, and the few new additions to iOS were largely added to apologize for the bigger dimensions. BlackBerry gracefully avoids these pitfalls. It would be an annoying reach around the keyboard to use the camera, for example. But the spacebar doubles as a shutter button, and the capacitive sensors are wonderful for dialing in quick exposure adjustments. Shoot a handful of photos and it's easy to get a feel for how this has been incorporated into the overall phone philosophy. BlackBerry doesn't apologize for this mass below the display, instead embracing it, giving people reasons to use it throughout the UI. Though that strength might also be the BlackBerry's greatest weakness for two reasons. One, users might embrace it, or might suffer from a plethora of choice. You get 29 buttons to customize. 29! You can assign multiple shortcuts and contacts all over this phone. I know several people personally who will probably pee themselves for options like these, but I also know a few folks who will likely consider this a chore. And point two, this phone gives off a somewhat poor first impression. It's extremely unfamiliar for a lot of the smartphone buying community. Now, I was a hardware keyboard junkie back in the day, and it took me a couple days before I stopped thinking about every keystroke. I'd imagine that early use might have an even steeper learning curve for someone who has only used software keyboards. That's the thing about hardware, you have to get a feel for it. But then you get the benefit of operating through feel, without ever looking at the screen, sliding from the spacebar after unlocking, to long pressing a key, launching an app, or messaging. All more reliable than voice actions. An alternate method of control which my evolved primate paws kinda dig. This is a wonderfully successful pairing. It's always exciting talking about gadgets that target a specific feature or issue, then nail the execution. This phone really does what BlackBerry claims it can do. Beyond just punching in letters, software keyboards aren't really a problem for anyone these days. This is a well-considered, polished control surface, which guarantees the KEYone becomes a bespoke gadget, tailor-fit to the individual who owns it. There's nothing else quite like it. As always, thanks so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe to this channel for our full BlackBerry KEYone coverage, including our full review alongside camera and audio reviews, and help us out with some sharing on your favorite social networks. For Pocketnow, I'm Juan Carlos Bagnell, some gadget guy on Twitter and Instagram, and I will catch you all on the next video.